I said, we do have a great show tonight, and we do have some really intriguing stuff happening in the wheels of the coaching carousel, don't you think? The wheels of the coaching carousel, I thought we were done. I truly thought we were finished, but it turns out we are not completely finished now, aren't we? Now, the last time that we came on here a couple of weeks ago, Boston College lost their head coach. Instead of, and it's not to who you think it was. Jeff Hafley was the previous head coach at Boston College. Instead of leaving for maybe another Power Five coaching opportunity at the college level, he's moved on to the NFL. He's with the Green Bay Packers as a defensive coordinator. And since then, in the last couple of weeks, we've been looking to see what Boston College does to go about filling that vacancy. And a few days ago, we actually do see what is going to happen with the next head coach of the Boston College Eagles. Ironically, this was released shortly after I released the last podcast, or shortly after I released the finished recording the previous podcast, because of course, so Boston College actually looked over to Ohio State and went and grabbed the offensive coordinator and quarterback coach at Ohio State, Bill O'Brien. This is a guy that was briefly hired by Ohio State. He was at Ohio State for like what, 3 weeks? 3 weeks total. This man was at Ohio State, never so much as coaching a practice or a game or hardly introduced himself to the team in general. I'm sure they were having off-season workouts, as is many college football programs around the country right now. But after 3 weeks, he is deciding to move on to the Boston College Eagles. He will be their next head coach. Now, this is not the first time Bill O'Brien has been a head coach at the college level. If you guys remember back in the early 2010s, this was in the light of the sanctions passed down for the NCAA to Penn State. This was because of the horrendous accusations from the Jerry Sandusky scandal. And it was one of the toughest punishments that we have seen, at least at the time, in the modern era. The NCAA hit Penn State with a $60 million sanction, a 4-year postseason ban, and then all wins dating from 1998 to 2011, they were all vacated from Joe Paterno's record. So Bill O'Brien was stepping in to really muddy waters from an institutional standpoint. And on the field, Penn State was also reduced to from 85 scholarships to 65 scholarships during that 4-year period as well. So Bill O'Brien was in a situation at the time that he was walking into. First time head coach at the college level, by the way. This is his very first head coaching opportunity. He is stepping in to a Big Ten conference that has expanded to 12 teams, that added Nebraska, and that's how you get the weird 2-year period of the Legends and Leaders division. And now you're tasked with just trying to keep Penn State afloat and just ensure that the death of a program does not happen, that you don't have what happened to SMU, where SMU was given the death penalty in the late 80s and early 90s, and they are just now being graced back into Power 5 football 40 years after the fact. And yet, in those 2 years that Bill O'Brien was at Penn State, he actually did a decent job of riding the ship. Even though in his 2 years, he's never been to a bowl game because of those NCAA sanctions, he posted 2 years where Penn State would have actually been good enough to be in a bowl game. He went 8-4 in his first year and 7-5 in the next year. 2 above average years in normal circumstances, But in the wake of what Penn State had to deal with on and off the field at the time, this was nothing short of a minor miracle. Now, he was not at Penn State for very long. He did end up going to Houston, and then he had his tirade in Houston where he did some stupid stuff like trade DeAndre Hopkins for a bag of M&Ms and David Johnson. You also have his time at Alabama, where even though the team put up a lot of points in his time at Alabama, a lot of the credit went towards Bryce Young, who ended up being the number 1 overall pick in the NFL draft. It was more of his greatness, not necessarily the scheme that Bill O'Brien designed while he was at the University of Alabama. And then, of course, he was the offensive coordinator and quarterbacks coach at New England. The New England Patriots were a dumpster fire last year. But after that long hiatus, it's been more than a decade. He is officially back in the coaching ranks. And even with all of the good and all of the bad that's happened in Bill O'Brien's coaching career over the past decade, I think this is a better hire than what people realize. First and foremost, Bill O'Brien is very familiar with the general area of what we got going on in the Boston area. He was a man that was born and raised in Boston. He was born in Boston back in 1969. And he also knows the geographical footprint of the area because of his time coaching at Penn State. Penn State, being in that same general area as Boston College in that northeastern part of the country. So he knows the northeastern part of the country really well. My question is for him, one, can he recapture his offensive brilliance that he had during his early portion of his tenure at Houston, where Houston ended up going to 5 playoff appearances in his first 7 years at the helm of the Houston Texans? And also, will he actually stay long term? I know there are some folks at Boston College that weren't too terribly happy with Jeff Hapley, but then he takes them to a bowl game, wins the bowl game unexpectedly against SMU, only to leave to go and be a defensive coordinator in the NFL. Does he stay long term for that? And I feel that maybe he could actually stay long term because he is somebody that, listen, he was someone that actually did end up going to school in the area. He went to Brown, which is somewhat close to the greater Boston area, and he was born and raised there. So for him to be home, I think this is actually more of a home run pick in terms of Boston College finding somebody on such short notice when a lot of the initial prime candidates that were mentioned at the beginning of the coaching cycle, they were already hired to more universities, other universities, I should say, that would be foreseen as a better opportunity to win at, even though some of the schools may not be of the Power Now 4 caliber or Power 5. So I like the hire by Boston College here. I actually think this is a B plus to A minus hire. I'm higher on this. Now, at first, I wasn't like in love with it necessarily because of what Bill O'Brien has done of recent, more so in his time in New England. But as I dig into the resume and what he's done at the college level and just getting to know Bill O'Brien, the person, I think this makes a lot of sense for Boston College. And if there's anyone that maybe could return Boston College to a little bit more prominence, just like what we saw in the days of Matt Ryan, for example. Matt Ryan had Boston College in the hunt for a national title. They were right there in that, you guys. This was a time when Matt Ryan was playing for the Boston College Eagles. And in a time where we're seeing Clemson, maybe not necessarily in a slippery slope kind of decline, but they're not at 100% efficiency like we have seen from Clemson in the 2010s, early 2020s, 2021, could Boston College carve a path, especially in the 12-team playoff system? Because remember, if you can get to 9-3, 10-2, then you put yourself in the hunt to make the college football playoff. Boston College wasn't too far from that at 7-6. So you're telling me you could find a way to win a couple more games here or there? You're in the discussion for a playoff spot in this new era? Is certainly not out of the realm of possibility. So I know there were some people out there that were a little bit more mixed about the Bill O'Brien hiring, but because of the fact that he is from Boston, born and raised, and because of what he was able to do in those tumultuous circumstances at Penn State, I'm actually higher up on this, higher than a lot of people. I think Bill O'Brien can do an excellent job at Boston College if he is given enough time to implement a good culture and learn from his mistakes from when he was the head coach of the Houston Texans. I'm really intrigued to see how Boston College does in his first year with Bill O'Brien at the helm.